Hello and welcome everybody. This is Conley Woods for TCGplayer.com, bringing you some new standard. The Pro Tour has just ended, and so I was thinking about brewing up this deck previous to the Pro Tour. It looks like the Pro Tour top 8, which was 8 different decks, which is pretty exciting, but none of them featured Gitrog Monster, so decided I would pursue that exploration this week, and probably a bunch of iteration throughout the next couple weeks, trying different builds and whatnot, because it's kind of open-ended. The best way to build this deck, just because there's so many different things to do with it. This particular version is Gitrog Goggles, which I haven't seen a version of. There might be someone out there who's written about it or something. I haven't seen it as of yet. I actually had 2 Pyromancer's Goggles in here for a while. I cut one in the last second. But the idea being that a lot of the cards that work well with Gitrog Monster, namely Magmatic Insight and Tormenting Voice, also work very well with Pyromancer's Goggles. So there's some overlap there. They're also both 5-drops that kind of enable your deck. So I was trying to see where the cross synergy sort of existed. In addition to that, you have Goblin Dark Dwellers, which has some synergy with Gitrog Monster, especially with things like Pulse Marasa. So we'll get to all that in a second. But the main goal here is what can we do to get this lovely toad with an arm coming out of his mouth? What can we do to get this to be most effective in Standard? And his ability is so open-ended, you can do a lot with it. Obviously, every color has access to getting lands in the graveyard thanks to fetch lands, Evolving Wilds. I even have a Warped Landscape in here. But the idea being, this guy is an engine, he's a win condition, he's a 5 mana 6/6, he's a win condition. And, you know, he's just a sweet card all around. So what can we do to maximize him? And Jund, in my opinion, is the most natural place to go because this guy's obviously green-black, and then red has the most natural ways to get cards into the graveyard, or to get lands in the graveyard. A card we're not running that I wanted to for a long time, and it's kind of the most obvious card to run with Gitrog Monster, is Molten Vortex. So obviously it would be like the premier red card to run with Gitrog Monster. The idea being that every land you pitch, you draw another card, you have another chance of drawing another land. So for every red mana you have a chance at continuing the combo, if you will. And so you want to be a pretty red-heavy deck. After building the deck and like looking at it, I couldn't keep the Molten Vortexes in the deck. I tried, but the deck was just too much of like a mid-range, kind of over-the-top control deck that Molten Vortex was kind of too cute and combo-y, and it really didn't help the deck progress in the early turns like it needs to. You really can't discard lands early. You can't afford to spend 2 red mana early. You might not even have 2 red mana early. There's just a lot of things about it. Plus, it doesn't directly synergize with Pyromancer's Goggles, which, you know, has some cost in and of itself. But even aside from that, both Magmatic Insight, which asks you to discard a land, and Tormenting Voice, which asks you to discard a card, which usually is going to be a land, are both red cards that work pretty well with Gitrog Monster. This becomes a 1-mana draw 3 when you discard a land, and then this obviously becomes a 2-mana draw 3 if you discard a land. So they both power up pretty nicely with Gitrog Monster. And yeah, and like I said, the overlap with Pyromancer's Goggles was nice, so I looked for a little bit more synergy beyond that. Fiery Impulse being an obvious one, so there's 3 copies of that. And then Call Against Command is another pretty sweet one to double up on, especially when you're getting back Goblin Dark Dwellers or Gitrog Monster or Tireless Tracker. Yeah, the concept for the deck is basically like, get this guy to work with these red cards and Pyromancer's Goggles. So from there, there's a lot of filling in to be done. I didn't know whether to run Deathcap Cultivator, I'll just pull him up, I guess. Just gonna explain him. There's not a lot of Deathcaps. This guy, I ran 4 of him for a while, and then I was ultimately like, well, this kind of wants me to cut lands for my deck. It wants me to play like 24 lands maybe, and I want to be running a decent number of lands since I have so many synergies. So I ended up cutting him. I also just ran out of room, I guess is another reason. But I think he's a viable option. I went with Hangerback Walker just because of its versatility throughout the game. We have 2 copies of Pulse Marasa and 2 copies of Call Against Command to retrieve creatures out of our graveyard, in addition to 2 copies of Goblin Dark Dwellers, which can do rebuy either of those cards. So with all that said, the creatures we do have in our deck, I would like them to be strong throughout the game because we're going to be returning them so often. Deathcap Cultivator, you know, it's not terrible in the late game as it is a Death Touch creature, but Hangerback Walker just provides so much more actual staying power, and he can win the game. Whereas this is mostly defensive. So I went with that for my 2-drop. And then the 4-drop slot, I couldn't figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I had things like Kalitas in there for a while. And I decided to try Thought-Knot Seer because I couldn't fit in Transgress the Mind, and I wanted some hand disruption just to beat up Control and beat up other mid-range. So I'm trying Thought-Knot Seer. I think I have 10 colorless sources right now. 3 Blinded Fend, 1 Warped Landscape, 4 Land and War Wastes, and then I'm running 2 Shivan Reefs as well. So 10 sources for this guy. We'll see if that's good enough. Honestly, he's very experimental. It could be the wrong choice. Putting Kalitas back in and maybe 1 more Goblin Dark Dwellers. Ultimately, I ended up, the last minute, the things I cut from the deck included a 2nd copy of Pyromancer's Goggles, the 4th Fiery Impulse, the 4th Magmatic Insight, and the 3rd Pulse of Marasa. So I tried to keep, mostly was just trying to keep my creature count high. Right now, all my creatures can win the game. They can all get pretty big. So we have Hangerback Walker. At 3, we have Tyler's Tracker. Everybody should be pretty impressed by this guy if you watch the Pro Tour. Just a really, really strong card. I debated trying Undergrowth Champion in this slot. Boom, boom, boom. This guy. But double green was a little bit of a turnoff, and the landfall on this is, it's very similar. You're getting a +1/+1 counter either way. Obviously, this guy's protected against like red spells and against creature decks, which is pretty nice. But against control, this is just a draw engine, which is pretty sweet. Like, you're looking at this deck, for example, and it's a Jund deck, so a card that like I thought I would be running 100%, and that makes sense and gets run in all these lists is Painful Truths. But we don't actually need the Painful Truths in our deck because of all the synergy we have. So we have Magmatic Insight to draw cards, Tormenting Voice to draw cards, Tireless Tracker to draw cards, Colligan's Command to draw cards, Pulse and Marasa will often draw cards. This is going to double up things, and then Gitrog Monster is going to draw cards in the late game. So, like, Painful Truths, I debated putting it in here, but honestly, it was one of the things I just had to cut because we have so many other things that are drawing cards and doing awesome things for us. Now, there is a chance that, you know, the Tormenting Voices are too gimmicky and the Pyromancer's Goggles is too gimmicky, and we end up putting Painful Truths in and something else and moving away from this direction. Or we go blue or something, and then all of a sudden Painful Truths becomes appealing again. But for now, I felt like we had enough card flow and card quality in this particular build without the Painful Truths that I cut it. So, yeah, we're going to try out the Tyler's Tracker plan. I think he's pretty strong. Like I said, we have the 2 pulses to get him back. We have 2 Colligan's Commands to get him back. 2 Ruinous Pass just to deal with some Planeswalkers and bigger creatures because we have a lot to deal with little guys. 3 Fiery Impulse. The Colligan's Commands deal with small guys. And then we just get to block things pretty well. We might be a little short on removal. It's something I'm slightly concerned with. But I was hoping that because we get to cycle through our guys and rebuy things with Pulse Marasa and whatnot, and we have Hissing Quagmire, so we can just trade things pretty often. And then the late game, we have, as I said, Hissing Quagmire and Blighted Fen that both turn into removal. So we get a little bit of reach with our lands later on. And then nothing's really going to beat up something like a Gitrog Monster in combat. So, you know, we'll see if I'm too removal light. We can definitely end up adding more as time goes on. But yeah, we have 3 Blighted Fen, which work with Gitrog Monster and cast Thought-Knot Seer and kill creatures, do all the things we want. 4 Evolving Wilds of note, 1 Foreboding Ruins, and 2 Game Trails right now. 4 Quagmire, 4 Land War Wastes, 2 Mountain, 2 Shivan Reef, 2 Swamp, and 1 Warped Landscape. Not only is it the 5th Evolving Wilds, but again, it's another land that taps for Thought-Knot Seer. If Thought-Knot Seer ends up being, if Thought-Knot Seer is something we want to play, but we find out we're a little too mana shy, what I'll end up doing is adding 1 or 2 more Warped Landscapes and cutting 1 or 2 Evolving Wilds, which will probably hurt the deck overall, but it'll make this card, it'll hurt the like synergy of the deck overall, but it'll make Thought-Knot Seer more consistent. So yeah, that's the main deck. Kind of just a big ball synergy, grindy Jund deck. Sideboard is very experimental right now, but just trying to kind of shore up weaknesses. 3 Radiant Flames for against aggro, along with a Fiery Impulse. Some more hand disruption, Transgress the Mind against like Collecting Company and whatnot. Pick the Brain comes in there as well. There's even a chance that we want some type of graveyard hate. I don't have anything right now in here, but we can consider that. Another Pulse against aggro. Another Goblin Dark Dwellers against control. The idea just being that once these get online, you actually bring in Pulse as well. It just gives you significantly more late game staying power. The Cletus is, I guess, against aggro. I don't know. I'm kind of experimenting with him. He probably is one of the first cards that are going to get cut. One Chandra against control, and then a World Breaker against control and against troublesome enchantments and whatnot. This also triggers your Gitrog Monster, which is kind of cool. But a lot of experimental stuff on the side, but I do not expect it to stay. Yeah, this is just our first iteration, or our first prototype. I've literally not played a game with it yet, so we're going to just jump in and start fooling around. Probably a bunch of bad card choices, I'm sure. A bunch of mistakes will happen, I'm sure. The bigger picture here is just to get a feel for the deck, find out what its strengths and weaknesses are, and how it's positioned in the metagame, and then we're going to iterate on that for next week and see if we can get Gitrog people. So for TCGplayer.com, I am Conley Woods. Gitrog Jund, loaded up in the barrel. We'll be right back for round one.